the families who bought new-build freehold homes, but a few years later find they cannot sell them. We've reported before on Moneybox how developers are increasingly imposing annual charges on homeowners to pay for maintaining roads and streetlights and parks. In many cases, the local council won't take on these costs. Through a management company, developers impose what's called, confusingly, a rent charge on the freehold houses to cover these expenses, and that charge can rise year on year without a cap. By using the legal definition of rent charge, the management company can take possession of a property if the homeowner gets 40 days behind with their payments. Dan Whitworth has more. Dan.
Well, Paul, Moneybox has learned that house sales are falling through because of rent charges for two reasons. The cost of the rent charges themselves and the fact that they can, as you say, seem to arbitrarily go up year on year. And that legal clause you mentioned, which allows homes to be repossessed by developers if homeowners fall more than 40 days behind on payments. So these two elements are scaring off buyers and making mortgage providers reluctant to lend.
And how do these charges actually come about, Dan?
Well, generally speaking, certainly recently, it happens when big new estates are built by private developers, but councils don't formally adopt them, meaning things that they won't pay to repair potholes, keep streetlights on, or maintain parks or open spaces. Now, developers say someone has to pay for the upkeep, and estate rent charges are the fairest way of doing that. So, developers register these new freehold properties with the land registry as being subject to estate rent charges. So it obliges homeowners, even though they're freehold, to pay these annual charges.
And how common are they now?
Well, to find out, we put in a Freedom of Information request to the Land Registry. The numbers show they're going up, and quite sharply. In 2013, there were 21,000 new-build freeholds registered with estate rent charges. That number more than doubled in the space of just 5 years to last year, when there were 45,000. So potentially more and more homeowners could have this problem over the course of the next few years. Now, this issue caused Peter Kirby and Jen Tweedle's house sale to fall through. They moved from London to Oxfordshire 3 years ago. They were told about the estate rent charge when they bought, but say it was described to them as nothing more than a small service charge. They tried to sell to first-time buyers over the summer, but their buyer's mortgage company wouldn't lend. The sale fell through, and now they're stuck in their home. Here's Peter.
We're looking at close to £4,000 has either been paid out or will need to be paid out. So probably about 2,500 has already gone. Maybe like 2,300 has gone, never coming back. And we still need to pay solicitors, hoping they will still actually be able to sell our house. We don't know. Maybe our house is unsellable.
And his fiancée Jen is angry too.
To be honest, we're absolutely devastated, really. We try not to dwell on it because we've got the kids and we're trying to look forward. But if I think back to the way we were treated by the developer solicitors, the sudden surprise of it all, the fact that the term "your house is unsellable" was thrown around at us. You would never buy a house to not be able to sell it again.
So, Dan, their buyer's lender pulled the plug. Are mortgage companies generally nervous about properties with these charges?
Short answer to that, Paul, is yes. In Peter and Jen's case, their buyer tried 3 different mortgage providers. None of them would make it work. So we spoke to all the big 6 lenders. Only one, Nationwide, has a specific policy on estate rent charges. Now, that position requires developers to change their legal rights on being able to take possession of a property. Other lenders said existing policies would be used to spot any unreasonable or onerous costs in relation to these charges.
Thanks, Dan. Well, live now to Leicester to talk to Beth Rudolph. She's director of the Conveyancing Association that represents solicitors and licensed conveyancers. Beth Rudolph, as Jen said, she was cross with her conveyancer. Isn't this the fault of solicitors and conveyancers that haven't pointed out these problems in the past?
Morning, Paul. So I think the issue here is about what information is available when. So I think they said that they had been told about the rent charge, but it was described to them as a small service charge. And the problem is that when a conveyancer is advising a client, they're not just advising them about this issue, they're advising them about a multitude of potential issues. And for the buyer of a property, understanding which one is most relevant to them at that moment in time is tricky.
Now, that's sort of up to the conveyancer, isn't it? I mean, this has been devastating for them.
Well, the other problem you've got, of course, is that lenders have changed their lending policy after the recent case where these were enforced. Now, I think for buyers, they need to know at the point at which they're deciding whether the property is right for them to put an offer in on. And under the law, the consumer protection regulations, that is what should happen. They should be given that information at the point that they're viewing a property. But we know only 2% of people are provided with that. By the time they get to conveyancing, they're too busy thinking about their mortgage application, whether they've got a local search being done, where they're going to put the kids into school. There's no bandwidth to consider what a rent charge means.
And all the fun, of course, of buying a new house.
Well, yes, and the excitement, and you do fall in love with them. And
so are you finding that this is getting more of a problem, though, now?
Yes, we're really concerned about it. And as Dan mentioned in his report, we're seeing a sharp increase, and that has come at the same time as we've seen the government announce that there is a ban on leasehold houses. So it's like whack-a-mole, as I've said before. It's just moved into this now.
Yes, well, listening to that in Oxford is Andrew Whitaker. He's Planning Director of the Home Builders Federation. So, Andrew Whitaker, why are developers imposing these endless and uncapped charges on freehold properties?
Well, let's put this rise into the context that house building overall has increased by 100% in the last 5 years. So proportionally, I don't think this is going through the roof, as your report suggested. But the reason those charges are put on estates is, as your report stated, the local authorities do not want to adopt those common areas of new estates. They don't want
Andrew,
the responsibility.
Sorry to butt in, but Andrew, it's not about the contribution towards the work being done. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. The problem is these draconian remedies. Why can't your members just exclude those from their documents? And in fact, the Law of Property Act actually says, except where contrary expression is made in the document. So why don't they just say, we will not repossess your property, we will not grant a long lease, we will simply go through the normal debt collection processes?
Well, what we've been doing is working with local authorities to change those contracts as far as we can. And a lot of those now give the power to the residents of the estate to form
that's simply
that
not
management
true.
company.
We're seeing ones where, in fact, just yesterday, one of our members went back to the developer because the lender would not accept that clause, and the developer said, no, I won't change it.
Can I ask a specific question to Andrew about this fact that local councils won't adopt? I mean, we talked to the Local Government Association and they said a couple of things. Firstly, that developers want to do this. I mean, there are alternatives. You could put a capital sum in, for example, so that it would pay for it in perpetuity. You don't do that. And also, local councils tell us that they can't adopt things once the developer has put a management company in place. So it's not the fact that local councils won't help, it's that you don't want them to.
Well, developers don't want to create problems for themselves, and if we can find a solution that doesn't involve a management company, such as adoption by the local authority or the parish council or the residents themselves, then we will always choose that. It's where we can't go down that route, and we have to put something in place. Otherwise, these common areas will not get maintained, and nobody wants that.
Well, I don't think that's the experience of some local authorities. They say that you choose this. This is your preferred method because it does give you this income stream, doesn't it? Isn't that why developers are doing it? So they sell the houses, they make a vast profit.
No, let's make this clear.
Their chief executives are paid a fortune, and now they get an income stream in perpetuity.
No. The management company fee goes to the management company. It does not go to the house builder or the developer. It is paying for the works to keep the common areas.
But you put those management companies in place. Beth Rudolph, what's your advice to consumers?
So, as I say, they do have rights to be provided with all information that would affect their decision to purchase the property. So they need to invoke that. If they go to any estate agent or any site office, they need to ask for their material facts disclosure. And if there is a rent charge, they need to ask that the provisions are excluded in relation to the possession or leasing of the property.
And that is what puts lenders off, presumably, because they fear they've got no security anymore if the householder just chooses not to pay these rent costs.
Absolutely. Under the Act, there's no provision for notice. So what Nationwide have said, for example, is we need to see that there's a clause for them to get notice.
So you want them to see these things and you want them to think about it carefully and presumably want your members to point it out. Andrew, what's your one tip? And you've got a few seconds to tell me.
Well, we believe that house builders do make it clear, and people need to work with their legal advisor to make sure that they are happy with the clauses in their contract.
And an independent legal advisor, not one put up by the developer, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is allowed independent legal advice in a house sale.
Andrew Whittaker, Beth, Rudolph, thank you very much for talking to us.